Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to literally tear up the traditional org chart and explore the surprisingly messy, multidimensional reality of how massive companies actually organize themselves. If you think you truly understand how your company is structured, you might want to think again, because the academic research reveals a much more complex picture.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by untangling the organizational structure puzzle, then we'll break down the three core dimensions: activities, decision-making, and legal entities, before finally seeing how they all harmonize together.
Part 1. The Organizational Structure Puzzle. It's time to move way beyond that basic org chart.
You know, most of us in the business world make a pretty massive assumption. When someone says organizational structure, we immediately picture that classic top-down tree branch diagram, right? Well, the academic literature actually diverges wildly on what structure truly is. Early research focused heavily on how strategy execution depends on a firm's structure, connecting it to performance and innovation. But surprisingly, scholars haven't always agreed on what it is they're actually measuring.
So here's the absolute crucial point to take away. Structure isn't just one single thing. It's actually a harmonized framework made up of three very distinct measurable dimensions. We're looking at the arrangement of activities, the representation of decision-making, and the actual legal entities. When you layer these perspectives on top of each other, it paints a much more holistic and honestly sometimes shocking picture of how a firm is actually designed.
All right, part 2, structure as activities. Let's look at the value creation dimension.
Diving right into our first dimension, the activities perspective. This is all about how we group specialized knowledge into distinct divisions to actually create value. Think of it kind of like compartmentalizing the division of labor, making sure the exact right people are in the exact right room together. You can organize these rooms by customer segments, by specific products, or even by geography.
Citigroup is a brilliant example of this. They arrange their massive, sprawling operations based entirely on the customer group they're serving. Notice how their institutional clients group handles all the heavy lifting for treasury and investment banking, while the personal banking and wealth management side takes care of retail banking and credit cards. It's a pure, clean grouping of economic activities driven completely by who the customer is.
Now look at Ford. They do exactly the same thing, but instead of customers, they focus on products and services, creating these highly distinct value creation buckets. You've got Ford Blue housing their legacy internal combustion engine vehicles, while Ford Model E is strictly dedicated to electric vehicles and software. They are intentionally grouping their specialized knowledge and labor right around specific product lines to maximize innovation and performance.
Moving on to part 3, structure as decision-making. This is the power and coordination dimension.
So the real question here is, who actually has the power to make the calls? It is absolutely vital to contrast these first two dimensions. While activities is all about dividing the labor, decision-making is about processing information and managing the inevitable political coordination between those divided units. We typically look at the top management team, the TMT, to understand this. Their specific job titles and roles reveal exactly how the organization handles internal power dynamics and interdependencies. Basically, decision-making is the hierarchical tool used to resolve conflicts between all those separate activity groups.
If we glance at Citigroup's executive team, we don't just see a simple list of department heads, we see a highly complex web of decision-makers representing business divisions, specific geographies, and even distinct legal subsidiaries to manage organizational conflict. You've got a CEO of Latin America sitting right next to the CEO of institutional clients. This proves that decision-making rights aren't just a carbon copy of the activity groups, they're layered strategically to coordinate resources across a massive, highly complex environment.
And over at Ford, their leadership structure relies heavily on executives who span multiple divisions. Why? To deliberately force synergies and coordinate resources across their different vehicle segments. Sure, they have a president of Ford Blue, but they also have a chief customer officer specifically for Ford Model E, and a CEO for a distinct legal entity called Ford Next LLC. It's a totally matrixed approach, explicitly designed to process information and bridge the gaps between those autonomous divisions.
Which brings us to part 4, structure as legal entities, the risk and boundaries dimension. Entering our third and final dimension, this perspective has nothing to do with product synergy or managerial power. It is strictly about minimizing financial risk and locking liabilities down into distinct, formal modules. It's literally like building individual, fireproof bank vaults. Sometimes organizations do this to capture tax advantages, but more often than not, it's forced by international law and strict compliance considerations. And honestly, these rigid legal firewalls can sometimes make internal collaboration pretty difficult.
Now here is the dramatic plot twist. Citigroup's rigid, geographically driven legal holding structure looks absolutely nothing like the customer-focused operational segments we looked at a few minutes ago. At the very top, you have Citigroup Inc., acting as a bank holding company which legally owns intermediate holding entities, which in turn own regional subsidiaries like Citibank Europe or Citibank Singapore. You won't find a legal entity here called institutional clients. This legal structure is a completely different beast, engineered purely for risk containment. And this legal containment strategy is everywhere. It's driven massive corporate overhauls at tech giants like Google and Facebook to provide greater transparency or just to comply with strict government regulations. Think about it. Google literally became Alphabet to legally separate its core search engine from its riskier other bets. Plus, after the 2008 financial crisis, new laws legally forced system-relevant banks to isolate their assets, so governments could resolve them faster if they ever failed. Ultimately, legal structure heavily dictates a company's flexibility. Finally, Part 5, harmonizing the three perspectives. Let's see what happens when these structures align, and when they don't.
All right, let's bring all this theory together. Despite their glaring differences, all three of these dimensions actually share some fundamental organizational design principles. Namely, they all separate elements into buckets, and they all rely heavily on hierarchy. Whether you're grouping tasks for value creation, assigning titles to the top management team to resolve conflicts, or building financial liability modules, you are keeping things distinctly separate. And every single one of them uses a nested, hierarchical chain to hold the whole shebang together. But the real magic happens when we see how companies map these structures over one another. Take Ford Next LLC, for example. It's a distinct legal entity, it's an operating activity segment, and its CEO sits right on the executive team. That is total 100% alignment. Citigroup, on the other hand, is highly misaligned. Their customer-facing operational activities flow right across and completely ignore their strict geographical legal boundaries. To wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought to take back to your own office. Are your company's activities, decision-makers, and legal entities working together in harmony, or are they constantly fighting against each other? Because when these structures are wildly misaligned, you really have to ask, are you stifling innovation or are you just brilliantly managing risk? Understanding these three separate dimensions completely changes exactly how you see the DNA of your organization. So keep exploring, keep questioning the status quo, and use these frameworks to reveal the real structures hidden right in front of you.